Now, let's look at how to use a longitudinal study in REDCap. Longitudinal studies are useful if you have a study where you're going to be using the same evaluation form for multiple events. For example, you may have a project where the subjects are going to be returning multiple times and receiving the same check-in evaluation. In that case, you would want to use a longitudinal study. In the longitudinal study, you'd be able to create one check-in form and have it repeat in each event. To create a longitudinal project, go to the Project Setup page and click Enable next to Use Longitudinal Data Collection with Repeating Forms in the main project settings box. Then, you'll go down to Define Your Events and Designate Instruments for them. Click on the Define My Events button. This will take you to a page where you can define what events you want in your project. For example, in my project, I have an initial check-in, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then the final evaluation. You can also have multiple arms in your study, for example, a control and an experimental arm. The events don't have to be the same in each. When you want to add a new event, start with the day's offset column. For example, here, I'm going to say 20 days after my final evaluation, I want to have a post-study follow-up. And then I can say how many days from that 48 days is it okay. Here, I'll say plus or minus 2 days. So, 48 days after the initial check-in, plus or minus 2 days, my participants will receive a post-study follow-up. Then I just click Add New Event. After you have finished defining all of your events, go to the Designate Instruments from My Events tab. Here you will see a grid that lists all of your events across the top, and then all of the forms in your project as rows. Click Begin Editing to see a series of checkboxes which allow you to choose which forms should be used in which events. For my post-study follow-up, I want the diet habit survey again and the follow-up again. When you're happy with how you've assigned your forms to the events, click Save. You'll need to do this individually for all the arms of your study. Another useful part of the longitudinal study is the more detailed use of the calendar that's available. On the Project Setup page, under the Enable Optional Modules and Customizations, enable Scheduling Module Longitudinal Only. Now go to Scheduling under Data Collection on the left-hand menu. Here, you can choose to add a new record or modify an existing record. You can pick a date for the first event. So, I'll say that for Record 8, their first event should happen on March 30th. Then you select an arm of your study, and REDCap will generate a schedule for you based on how you defined your events. It will also let you know if any of your events fall on something that isn't a standard business day, because you might want to move that date around. You can modify any of these dates to better fit your or the participant's schedule. When you're done, click Create Schedule. Now, all the date and times have been added to the calendar. You can edit the schedule or add more information. For example, you can put in times and add notes, or even change the date the event is scheduled for. After you've done this, you can visit the calendar to see how all of your events for all of your participants have been scheduled. Here, you can see the event I just scheduled, the initial check-in for Record 8. When I click on it, a pop-up comes up that lets me edit information about it. For example, I can change the status so that it indicates whether it's a due date, scheduled, confirmed, if the person canceled, or if there were a no-show. I can also jump to the data entry forms for that record and that event. So for example, at the initial check-in, they need to fill out the demographics and the diet habit survey. However, for this week 4 for Record 6, all they need to fill out is the check-in. If you make any changes to the dates and times in the events, the calendar will update automatically. One good note with the longitudinal project is that sometimes you don't have exact dates when you need to do your follow-up. For example, you might just do the retest after you finish collecting the data for all the initial tests. In that case, you can still use a longitudinal study. You can just do it without specific dates. If I go back to the Define My Events page, what I would do here is, instead of providing exact days offset, I could just put them in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or, even better, with some breaks in between, 0, 5, 10. That way, if you want to add any additional events in between current existing events, you've got some space to do it. Always do put some kind of date in the date offsets when you're defining your events, though. If you don't put any dates, REDCap will just alphabetize all of your events by the event name. So that's how you use the longitudinal project in REDCap. For our last video, let's take a look at some of the advanced features you can use in REDCap to better optimize your database.